the car sounds like.
Hi guys and gals, this is Chad, and I wanted to welcome you to the first episode of the Speciale Cruise Conversations series. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you want to see more content, click the subscribe button below. Thanks.
What was your first car then?
My first real car?
Yeah.
It was a 1991 Honda Accord sedan. It had the cool, you know the seatbelt thing where you open the door automatically, the seats puts a seatbelt on you? And it had the lap belt.
I know what you're talking about. My parents had that.
Yeah. But, I don't know, I was always into cars. I was actually into bikes a lot because, like bicycles, like GT bikes, because you couldn't drive back then. And then, but it was funny, my mom, her good friend worked at the post office, and apparently, I don't know if he was trying to get the publishers clearing sweepstakes or whatever, but he literally subscribed to every single magazine that's available. So what would happen is, every time he would come by and visit my mom at their working place when they would deliver mail, he would give them like bags, like the old school Liberty House bags with the big brown paper bags with the handles, and it would be full of magazines from pretty much every single magazine. But he personally sorted it for us of what my interests were. So some of them, of course, were cars. The other one were like Scientific American, stuff like that, and like Wired and all that tech stuff. So I always had like car magazines, because this is before the internet, right? There wasn't any internet yet, so I would have literally every single magazine, every single month. So we had Car and Drive, the standard American publications, which is Car and Driver, Automobile, Motor Trend. Those are the things, the main three. Oh, and then Auto Week we would also have. So I was always reading up on the latest car news and the different models. So actually it was from that I was kind of already aware of almost every single type of car, as well as the specs and everything. That was all during high school, before I could drive, so freshman year. So I was always, I knew about cars. But yeah, I had a Honda Accord. And then when I had some money, when I was in college, I finally bought like a newer car, and it was a 2000 Acura TL. And I remember it was so cool because it was like, oh, you have, it's like the Honda Accord, but it's the luxury version, and it has a little bit more power. And I thought that was cool. And that was in the era that I was also trying to get more, to make it look nice now, right? So I was into the whole car detailing thing. I mean, every weekend would be just detailing the car. And it was just cool because it had a little bit more power, and it had, you could shift the gears yourself. It was still an automatic, but you had the Acura TL at the time, 2000, had a little shifter, so you could, hold in first, and you could redline each gear. It was also cool because it had xenon headlamps. Oh, it was so cool, right? Back in that time when the Acura TSX came out, that was a rival to the BMW 3 Series, and it was so cool. But unfortunately, it was the year 2000, so it didn't have the projector lenses. It just had literally a xenon bulb inside of a regular reflector housing. So it was still cool because you start it up and it like starts off blue, which I guess was the coolest thing back then. I thought it was cool. But yeah, so it was that. And now but at that time, then I found Top Gear. This was in 2000 and I would say 2002, maybe 2003. And I started watching Top Gear, and I had all the magazines. I knew, oh gosh, everything about the cars, but know, you could see the cars, you could hear the cars, and they had their own little snippet review. So I actually found Top Gear, the Viper 007 Bob. He had a website that helped push BBC as well as 5TV from the UK over, so that's how I got introduced to Top Gear and Fifth Gear. And then, of course, you know, they only review exotics right at the time. So I think the first episode of Top Gear was, I think it was the Murcielago, I read Murcielago, and on one of those series it had, of course, Ferrari. One of the big ones that kind of changed my outlook on things was he had a comparison test between the 360 Challenge Stradale and the 996 GT3 RS at the time, and I was like, wow. You know, I wanted something like that. Of course, I was still young and I was still in college, but it started getting me to look at different types of cars, because, you know, growing up in Hawaii, our parents and everybody all had Japanese cars. They all had Toyotas and Hondas, so but I wanted a BMW. When I was in college, the dream car was a BMW 330i with the ZHP, which is the competition pack. So I had a slightly higher RPM, revised suspension, custom wheels. That was the thing to have. I think at the time it was 33,000, I think. But anyway, fast forward, I had that Acura TL for a while, and actually the first German car I bought, which was the next car, was a GTI. It was a 2007 Volkswagen GTI, and it had a dual clutch transmission, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was such a good car. It did everything well. It had a hatchback, so it had a lot of space. We got the 4-door one. Had the whole fully loaded, had the body kit, you know, and all that stuff. So it looked really nice, and it was black. And man, you know, going into a Volkswagen, a German car coming from Japanese cars all your life was like, oh my god, like the handling was so good. There was no slop in the steering wheel, and of course that was one of the first applications of the dual clutch transmission in a normal car. I think any car actually. I think that was the first application of any car with a dual clutch transmission. So you can do paddle shifting, so that just opened my eyes to something a lot greater. It was funny too when you compare the Volkswagen to like other cars, because it was turbocharged, like you didn't need to rev it that high and go fast. And I remember I used to make fun of all the Hondas at the time, because it was kind of comparison between, what was it, like the Honda Fit, and then kind of similar car, and then the other one was Mazda, right? Mazda Speed 3 at the time. And yeah, I just loved it that you didn't have to rev it because it was turbocharged. It was 200 horsepower, 200 pound-feet of torque. And actually the reason why I got the GTI was because Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear did a review of the Volkswagen GTI, and they were talking about how before, you know, it was, the glory days was so great, but then when it got to the Mark III and the Mark IV, it kind of got a little overweight and not as exciting and sluggish. But when they got to the Mark V, which is the one we bought, came out model year 2006, we got the 2007. You know, they went to the 2-liter turbocharged 4, where before they had the 1.8, so that way more power, way more torque, and the suspension was a lot better, and it was fun to drive again. So that's actually, Jeremy Clarkson was the one that kind of convinced us to get the GTI, so we were sold. So GTI was fun. Gosh, we just sold that too, like 2 years ago, so we've had it for like, I think 12 years, maybe 11 to 12 years before I sold it. But after the GTI, there was the crash of 2008, the stock market crash, and you know, I was investing a lot during the time, and you know, 2008 was horrible and it was just destroying everything. But when it recovered, we made a good chunk of money on the recovery as it came back out in 2009. So I wanted to get something special and trade in and get rid of my Acura TL, and that's when I started looking at BMW. The main thing I always wanted was a BMW M3. You know, back then it was a 330i with the competition pack, but they also had you know, the E46 M3 with the competition pack, which is gorgeous. They had the I think it was some sort of a dark blue, was in all the car magazines at the time. And I always wanted an M3, but I found out, the E90s versions of the M3 was the V8, right? It was a high revving V8. I think it had a red line of like 8,000 RPM, if I recall correctly. And at that time, in the 2008-2009 time frame, we found out all the news, through the magazines and stuff. We found out that the next version, which I believe was the F80 after the E90, they were going to go to turbocharging. They were going to downsize to the inline 6 or turbocharged. So I was like, okay, I need to get this E90 version of the M3. And the reason why too was because the E90 was actually the first generation that they brought back the 4-door sedan of the M3, right? Because the E46 only had a coupe version and a convertible version. And of course, going back to the I think it was E40, then they had the sedan again, but the E46 was absent, but the E90 version had it. So I was like, okay, I need to get that sedan body E90 with the M3 with the last naturally aspirated high revving V8. So I went to BMW, and just for kicks, at the time I was kind of going back and forth because along with the E90 versions, they also had the 335i, right? So before it was always 330i, right, with 3-liter V6, 3-liter inline 6, and then they had the 325, which I think it was only like 250 horsepower or whatever. But when they went to the E90, the first gens had just the inline 6s, but when they went to the second LCI upgrade, they went to the turbocharged and they added the 3-liter turbocharged, and then they called it, for the beginning it was just a 330i, which had the turbocharged inline 6, which had 300 horsepower, 300 pound-foot of torque, and then of course at the end they called it a 335i. So I was curious, right? You had the 335i with 300 horsepower and 300 pound-foot of torque, and then you had the M3, which had 420 horsepower, and I believe it was 295 pound-foot of torque. I remember going back and forth, people are saying, well, the 335i is actually just as fast as the M3, just because they have a turbocharged engine now. So I went to the BMW dealer, and just for kicks, let's try both of them. So we first went on the 335i. I mean, it was so fast at the time. It was incredible. And we're like, wow, this is really good, and it was a lot cheaper than the M3, obviously. But then I was like, oh, I see this M3 up there on the shelf, on one of the racks. I was like, can we just test drive that? I said, yeah, we will back-to-back compare it. So the dealer, the salesman goes and gets the key, and he starts up the M3, and I was like, oh my god, I'm sold. Because it had when you first start it up in the cold start, it has like a bark and like a burble that the inline 6 didn't have, and I was like, oh my god, I'm already sold. So before I even drove the M3, I just heard him start it up, and I was like, let's go, let's wrap it up. But just for kicks, we still drove it, which of course was great. So, but it was really sold just by the sound of the engine starting up compared to the 335i. So yeah, so we bought the M3. And I had that for 5 or 6 years. It was a great car. You could do everything with it. You really needed to rev it out though. It felt heavy at low speeds, but when you really rev that engine up, then you get that light feeling as you're driving. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm sure other car enthusiasts will know. But yeah, the car feels light all of a sudden. It was just good. It had really good handling and good speed and good brakes, and you had 4 doors, so you could literally use it every day. And I believe I used it as my daily driver. I put about 45,000 miles in like 5 years. So that was really good. Now it gets interesting, right? When I was driving the M3 and I started, when I got the M3, I was already working. So I graduated college, obviously. It's back in 2009. And then I started wanting more because I was starting to make more money. and the M3 was fine, but it was like I want something more dedicated. The M3 was good at both everyday driving as well as spirited driving, but I wanted something not as user friendly. I wanted to sacrifice some of the comfort for the experience. So I started looking around. That's actually when I met Roy from Jane Exotics. You know, we were looking at a couple of things. We looked at was that a cop up there? No. I remember I looked at Porsches actually too. I test drove a 997.2 Carrera 4S with buckets and everything. That was an incredible car. I test drove a Cayman at the time. All incredible cars, but you know, as we looked more and more into the cost, I was like, you know, I was torn between buying a brand new Cayman or a brand new 911 versus an older 911. I'm not, when I say older, I mean like a couple years old. And I guess I couldn't stomach buying a new one, knowing that in a couple years it would be the same price as the used one. And when I test drove those cars, I also noticed that I even test drove a 991. The 997.2 just had so much more purpose. It had carbon racing bucket seats and everything. You just felt lower to the road, and just a test drive, I felt like I was on a racetrack. I could hear everything under the car. The steering wheel was jumping around. The car was skipping around. I loved that. It kind of introduced me to a level of feedback that I just hasn't not experienced before. But yeah, I mean, it was that, and I just couldn't wrap my head around spending money on a brand new one, especially since they all go down in value. So what did I do? I ended up going to Roy at Jane Exotics, and I test drove a couple of cars. We looked at a Maserati just for kicks, but I felt it was too luxurious and not as much performance, although it sounded great. I looked at, we also test drove, I looked at a Ferrari California, and actually that was the first Ferrari I've ever driven. It was a Ferrari California, and I remember comparing it to the M3 at the time, and the California, and this is the first gen, so it had the, you know, naturally aspirated high rev V8, you know, they didn't have the turbocharging yet. So it was, what was it? It was like everything below a certain RPM felt the same as the M3, but definitely on the high end, the M3, the California was way faster. And I love the paddles that the California had. It had fixed long paddles, right, where the M3 had these little like plastic paddles behind the steering wheel that moved with the paddle, because the M3 I had was a dual clutch, it was BMW's MDCT. So I did that. I also test drove an R8 V10, which was very, very intriguing. And the thing I noticed about the R8 V10 too was the suspension was so compliant, because that was when they first started going to that magnetic damper system, so that it's constantly adjusting it. So I remember like looking at potholes and like, oh my god, I'm gonna hit it really hard, but it actually was nothing. It was actually glided right over. So anyway, yeah, so it was R8 V10. It was Porsche 911s. The Cayman I couldn't swallow because I knew it would go down in value. I didn't want to spend all that money on a brand new Cayman for it to just drop in value. So I was looking at a used 911, and at that time, and the Ferrari California, I even test drove a Ferrari F430, and I thought at the time that the cost difference just didn't make sense. It wasn't that much different than my M3. So I remember when I looked at all those options, it just so happened at that time, Chris Harris put out a video. He had a pre-production 991.1 GT3 And there was a lot of controversy around it. It only had dual clutch transmission, right, where all the previous ones only had a 6-speed before. The other controversial that it had was that they dropped the Metzger engine. And the last thing was, they went to electric steering. So they used to have hydraulic steering before, with the 991, regular 911 went to electric steering, and this GT3 would be the first GT3 in the line that would have electric steering rack. So there was those three things that we were worried about, and Chris Harris just happened to put a video online specifically about a pre-production model that he drew. It was actually that review that I called my Porsche dealer the very next day. I probably texted him that night when the video came out, and I said, put my name down for a GT3 allocation. It's actually what happened. And so we put our name down for the allocation, and then we just waited. We played the waiting game. It took 2 years, I think. It took 2 years. It was about the 1.5 year mark after my name was on the waiting list. I got a call saying that unbelievably that we got an allocation. So I think it was 18 months after I put my name in the waiting list, we got an allocation. So of course I jumped on the opportunity and we just spec'd it out and ordered it, and yeah, that was a special day. I remember going on, reminisces forums. If you're a Porsche guy, we're on reminisces forums checking like what colors should we get, what specs should we configure it as, all of that stuff, and it was so much fun. We finally, what were the main contention was that I had was brakes. I didn't know if spending an extra $9,000, that's what it cost at the time, was spending another $9,000 for the ceramic brake option, was that even worth it? And I remember I kind of kept going back and forth, like what else could I spend $9,000 on the car? But eventually I ended up with getting the carbon ceramic brakes. The color was another one. I was stuck on GT Silver. I really wanted GT Silver, which is a special color, but man, I think it was like $3,500 for that special color. So then I think I ended up with the Sapphire Blue. Yeah, I think it's called Sapphire Blue. So eventually I ended up on Sapphire Blue, which had, I think it was only a $750 option. And I felt that was a good compromise. I didn't want a standard color. I felt, my M3, I forgot to mention, but my M3 actually was, I think it was called Silverstone Metallic, which is like the standard gray silver that BMW has. It was kind of like a supercar, and I never really liked how the 911 looked without a big spoiler on it. I get it, the standard teardrop shape, but it just looks like it's missing something. So that's why I really like the GT3. But I wanted it to stick out. I wanted like a color. I mean, it was my first like expensive over $100,000 car. So I wanted a color, and that's why we ended up on the blue, sapphire metallic blue or whatever. And so we finally ordered it. After we ordered it, it took about 3 to 4 months to come in. I remember going online and checking, the shipment status and everything. I remember tracking the boat coming into Hawaii, and it was just an exciting experience. We finally came in, and we didn't even. I pushed my salesman to do the first PDI inspection right when it got off, so that way I could get it the same day, which I did. I picked it up like it was like at 6, 7 at night, and it was just amazing. We picked it up, and I remember when I first drove home with it, it was it truly was like a bag of marbles in the engine, because when you're at idle, it's just making like a metallic noise that sounds like something's broken in the engine. And then as you're accelerating, usually under load, it sounds like a bag of marbles shifting around. I thought it was so cool and so different. And the GT3 looked amazing, and I loved the wing in the back. I think I changed the front side markers to grayed out ones with clear lenses. It's just nice, very nice. So every year that By the way, we got it at MSRP. This is before the dealers started marking it up. But actually, so you need once a year service, right? You're not familiar with that, right? You go from BMW, they say, especially back then, like, you need to bring it in every 6 months or whatever, and they charge you like a ridiculous amount of money. But then the GT3 was a once a year service. You would take it in, and I believe the first service I had, I think it was only like $563. And I was like shocked. The BMW, I spent more than that every 6 months. It was like ridiculous how I don't know if it's overpriced or how expensive that BMW was. And then to make it worse, BMW, you bought it and at that time, money was a big thing. So like, I bought the M3, I think it was like $80,000. And when I sold it, it was like only worth like $30,000 to $35,000, and that was like after 5 years. I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. But I wanted that GT3, so anyway, the GT3 has a yearly service, and every time I would take my car to Porsche, I would just happen to walk up to see Jane Exotics, right? Like, what do you have? And trying to see what it is. So the GT3 was a great car. I owned it for 2 years. And every year I would take a look at the market and see what they're worth, and they were always worth a little bit more than what I originally bought it for over $150,000. So I was like, okay, so how can I use this perceived equity and get something more exciting? And the only reason why I had the GT3 and I was looking around and I thought, okay, well, it doesn't go down in value, so why not just take a look at Ferrari and and all those kinds of things. So started looking, and every year we would go and look, and just so happened, funny story, but we were after the first year of ownership of the GT3, I took it in for a service, I went to Jane Exotics, I went to go look, and I was like, oh my god, they have a 430 Scuderia in the showroom. This was in 2016, 17-ish. I remember it was like, oh man, they have one. I really wanted that because it was like, I like the special edition of cars, right? So like, the GTI is like the special, more high performance version of the regular Golf. Then the M3 was the more special edition of the 3 Series. And then, the GT3 is obviously the more special performance version of the regular 911. So I was like, okay, the Ferrari 430 Scuderia is perfect because it's the track version of the regular F430. And I remember I was working with Roy, and we went to test drive it, and I was blown away. And we were working on numbers, but apparently my good friend now was actually eyeing the same one, and he actually was able to secure his deal before mine. So unfortunately, I did not get that particular Scuderia. It was a 2009 Scuderia, and so I was like, well, that's, to me it was no big deal because I still have my GT3. So another year goes by, came up for my second annual service in the GT3, take it in, and sure enough, there was actually, this is when JN moved, this is when they first opened Velocity, and they opened Velocity, and so I went in, and unfortunately the salesman from Jane Exotics, which is Roy, he passed away earlier that year. So I went in because I wanted to make sure that they still had my file. So Roy had a file, he was looking at all the cars that I was interested in, keeping an eye out for me in case there was something of interest that came that I would want to buy. So I take my GT3 for service, I go to Jane Exotics, their new location. I just want to make sure that, the file that Roy has on me is transferred to someone. I go there, meet the new salesman, and I tell him, hey, you have my file? He's like, oh yeah, we have your file, we're just, we're backed up because unfortunately he passed away, they just moved. And they asked, so what car were you looking for anyway? And I was like, well, I was looking for an F430 or really a 430 Scuderia. And I remember, I think it was a Wednesday that I took the GT3 in. And I believe, that was Wednesday. And I believe Thursday, the very next day, the salesman, they called me and they said, you know what? We actually have a 430 scooter not on the floor, but upstairs getting service right now. And they asked me, you know, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah. I mean, it was literally Wednesday, and yeah, they had one, and I was shocked because I wasn't prepared for something that quick. So I said, yeah, like, well, let's see how we can make this work. So I gave them my specs in the GT3, and believe it or not, but they gave me, as a trade-in, the GT3, they gave me every single penny I paid for it when it was brand new. So I was like, well, I can't pass this opportunity up. So I did it. I said, yeah, let's do it. You know, they run the numbers and all that stuff, and so that was Thursday. Wednesday, I went to talk to them, make sure this is what I want to know. Thursday, they call me saying, hey, we have one there. I submit my paperwork Thursday. On Friday, we get an acceptance saying, yep, all good to go. And on Saturday, I went in and I signed the papers. And that's how I got the 430 Scuderia. It was in a matter of like 3 days. I remember my wife saying, like, you just called them on Wednesday. I mean, you went there on Wednesday, and then on Saturday, I signed it, and then yeah, it was like crazy. And I remember it was a sad day on Saturday because I had to trade in the GT3, so it was a sad day, but I traded that GT3, and yeah, I had a Scuderia. Isn't that insane? I mean, it was like a matter of, was that Thursday, Friday? In 3 days, I went from, hey, I'm just you know, looking for a 430 Scuderia, you know, take your time, not no rush, and then 3 days I had it. It was like it was meant to be. And I remember when they said, hey, it's accepted, it's all good to go, just let us know if you want to proceed. And I did think back, I looked at some old pictures, you know, because Roy really helped me. Was a nice guy. Turns out he's actually related to a friend of mine. And yeah, I just felt like, you know, it was a stretch, you know, it was a lot of money. This is my first like Ferrari, and it, you know, the payments just go up from here, right? And I remember just thinking like, oh, can I really do this? Is this crazy? But I had to do it, and I did it, and I couldn't believe it. So then I had the Scuderia 3 days. My wife liked it because it was black and it had a gray racing stripes. It's actually from a friend of mine now. It was his old car, and it was a 2008. I remember so it was about 10 years old when I bought, 9 years old when I bought it, and I think it didn't have that much mileage. I think it had like 3,600 miles on it, maybe. It was really low. Yeah, it was great. I remember that night when I drove it home, the only thing I could think about was, man, it was so analog and raw. Coming from the GT3, I mean, the GT3 was good, but damn, this Scuderia was just like, it was analog and raw and angry, and it just provided a level of feedback that definitely isn't from like the other cars. Definitely not. Yeah, and then they kind of had the car, and again, just like usual, every year when I bring it in for service, I check up and I see what's on the floor, like, what other kind of cars are out there, right? And I didn't want, I had the Scuderia. I knew after 2 years I just wasn't using it as much. Wasn't using it that much because of the transmission was the hardest part. You just couldn't drive it like you wanted to every day. Like I remember before I would ever go out for a drive, I would really think about it. I would think, okay, let's check the maps. Is there any traffic along our route? Are we gonna get stuck? Because I always feared that transmission would explode on me, and I felt like the the clutch was just always wearing, and I didn't want that to happen. I think it was like $10,000 to replace a clutch. You know, like I didn't want to be during my destroying the clutch. I feel like I was destroying the clutch for like non-fun miles. Like, you know, like there's one thing destroying the clutch over good fun spirited driving. There's another thing to just kill it because you're just sitting in traffic. I remember going on the F chat, you know, Ferrari chat forums, and one of the main things was like, oh, you're worried about clutch wear? Well, then you shouldn't drive it. They're like, well, that's just like tire wear. Like, so what you're gonna say, you don't want to, the tires are expensive, so you shouldn't drive it. Like, at what point it becomes like it's silly, right? And yeah, it was just hard to, it was very fun to drive, and I think it would be great fun on a track or someplace that's not Hawaii, where just randomly you could get stuck in a traffic jam. Mantra goes, right? If you ask any car enthusiasts, especially the guys that like speed and looks, they like the mid-engine cars. And they're right, you know, it is a lot more exotic. Even the 911, right, because the engine's behind. They don't feel that the engine in front, it's like any other car. They don't feel that it's a true like supercar or exotic. So I honestly thought that way as well. You know, I mean, sort of not fully committed like they are, but I always wanted a Ferrari V12. And there's really only one way for us mere mortals to get a Ferrari V12, and that's with a front-mounted V12. So you're talking, you know, in the more modern realm, you're talking 599, and you're talking the F12. Those are the only two I think that are modern enough that it would be safe to buy. I mean, yeah, of course, we all wanted a 550 Maranello or 575M. Of course, made famous by Bad Boys 2, right? Will Smith's character drove it on the freeway. He had that silver, I think it was a 575M with the nice hood scoop and everything, and it was just so cool. But those are the only two. And now it's the 812 Superfast, but at the time, it was only really the F12 and the 599, and I didn't want the 599 because of the transmission was similar to single clutch gearbox, so I went with the F12. The F12 again was owned by a friend of mine, and I remember when he picked up that F12 new, I remember he said, "Oh, I just got it, Chad." So we went to his condo in Ala Moana, and we're like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna go take a look at it." We looked at it and I was like, "Oh my god, it's perfect. It's white." He let me start it up. We revved it a little bit. I was like, "Oh, this is what I want. You know, something special." And it's a Ferrari V12, and it had what, 740 horsepower. I mean, it's crazy. And I remember telling him, because I had my Scud at the time. I remember telling him, I said, "Hey, whenever you're ready to sell this, you let me know, and I want to buy it." Sure enough, but fast forward 2 years or whatever it is, I think it was 2 years, and it was, he was selling it. He was getting rid of it because he was going to get a GT2 RS. So I bought it. Yeah. Long story short. And you know, at first when I remember picking up the F12 and I drove it, and this is when I just got out of the Scud, and I was like, oh, you know, it's a little bit, I was almost like a little disappointed. I was kind of like, well, it just seems like a luxury barge, and you know, the hood is like so long, and you feel it doesn't handle as good as the Scuderia. And I remember I was kind of, I had a smidge of buyer's remorse, but man, you know, it all goes away, man. Once you press the accelerator, it's kind of insane. I mean, the rear tires just light up instantaneously. And I know I said in my earlier video, but when that night I picked it up, I drove to a friend's house, which is on the west side of the island, and I'm on the east side. So it was a good, decent drive. I would say it's like 25 miles or something. And man, that thing, it's a continent cross-country destroyer. Like, it will go across the entire, whatever you put at it, and you're comfortable, and you have so much power reserved under your right foot. And I think that's what it's really about. And you get the noise. The noise is not as loud. Well, from the inside, it's not as loud, but it's loud. The V12 has a bark, and it revved to, I think it revved to like 8,500 RPM, and the induction noise that comes in through the cabin. Oh my god! And just the fit and finish of everything, it was just on another level. And even to this day, the F12, you could tell that is Ferrari's flagship, their normal flagship model, because, you know, the attention to detail on the bodywork outside, the trim pieces, even inside, was just so much better than the Scuderia, or even better than the other cars that I looked at. I just can tell they put a little bit more care and attention into their flagship GTs. And one thing I couldn't get used to for a while was the handling, because you sit so far back, you sit like in front of the rear wheels, so you kind of like a turn like this as opposing to turning in the middle. So it took a while to get used to, and it was scary. I remember we went on a drive, one of the first Ferrari Club drives, and I brought the F12, and it was only like a month maybe less than since I got it, and we went up some windy roads, and it is scary, because I was so used to just flicking the car in and, you know, letting everything rotate around me, but it was a weird sensation. But after a couple more weeks, and I, you know, on my free time, I would drive aggressively someplace just to try to feel out the car, and then it kind of like, you just gotta turn it a little bit late. You kind of like go past it, and you turn it late, and you use the quick steering to kind of dart the nose in, and then you can follow out with small amounts of counter steer with throttle, and then you can, then it totally makes sense. One thing too that was better was the brakes. The F12 brakes were league ahead of Scuderia. You see the carbon brakes are good, but I think in normal street use you'll never get them up to temperature. Like if I did some brake bedding in, then the brakes are fantastic, but I mean on most normal driving you're not going to get to that level. So I always felt like depressing the brake pedal did not stop me. But the F12 was really good in that regard. The F12, even though with front-mounted engine, of course, you know, a lot of cars, that's not a supercar. But you know what? At first I believed that, but the more I drove it, man, it was the best supercar. You could do everything with it. You had storage space in the back with the hatchback. You had the most amazing soundtrack ever. You had all the power that you could need. Had a great transmission, great carbon ceramic brakes, and it just looked the part. It was a gorgeous vehicle. And I don't think, I even told my friends too, like, oh, if you want to test drive it, you can drive it, but, and you know, they just want to know how a front, you know, Ferrari GT feels. But it's not just a single drive. You gotta own, not own, you don't have to own it, but you got, well, owning it is better because you put your money in it, it's different, but you gotta drive it for a long period of time, and then it starts to reveal to you all these little things that make the supercar ownership experience even better. The main thing is the sound, man. You don't have to be going fast. The sound is just, it sounds like a freaking F1 car in the tunnels or in the underpasses. And you can find excuses just to wind it up. It's definitely a supercar though. And I encourage anybody who doesn't think so to buy one. And that's what you gotta do. You just gotta buy one and do it. It's the same concept to like, remember when I started dabbling in the stock market, people go, oh, well, you know, I kind of like pseudo did it. Like I put out a spreadsheet, like if I bought this there, and this many shares of this, I'd be this. It's like, but it's not the same until your money is in it. And I think that's the same thing that applies to cars. And you have to do it to learn from it. Every single purchase or experience you make with a car, there's something you take back. I've done a lot of things in my lifetime, from foreclosure auctions. We've done all kinds of things. Weird refinance, mortgage things. We've done everything because that's the only way you learn. You can read about it in a book, but until you do it, you don't really take back the lesson learned. The thing I used to tell people too is like, you'd rather go skydiving with like someone who's read all the books or someone that's actually done it. And that's where all these experiences that I've done. I've put my neck out there so many times in terms of car purchases that I won't reveal the cost on the video, but you don't know until you do it.